No, 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 no.
Okay, so apparently this needs to be addressed once again. One of the most well-born and strained arguments for continued mass migration is the allegedly inevitable demise of the aging and infertile European people. It is kind of true if we're talking about Eastern Europe, which has an overall decreasing population, but it is entirely off if we're talking about France, for instance, which, even without its insane levels of immigration, has a fertility rate which keeps the population steady. This is the case not because of the mass importing of uneducated men from Northern Africa or the Middle East, but it comes as a result of a plethora of different benefits that are given to French families from the state in order to encourage people to have kids. The Vice Prime Minister of Italy, Matteo Salvini, is worried about the predicted 10% population decline in Italy in the coming decades, and has proposed several new pro-family government policies in order to counteract this. I'm also a bit of a fan of Salvini, and I love the fact that he wants these different pro-family programs to be funded by an extra tax on immigrants sending money out of Italy and overseas. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has already implemented similar family-friendly government policies in order to keep Hungary Hungarian. The result is what has been described as a policy-induced baby boom, and Hungary is seemingly turning around its negative trend of a declining population, which has previously been claimed by globalists to be inevitable. And similar different family policies are also being implemented in nations outside of Europe, like in Japan, a country infamous for its aging population and young people who've simply given up on getting children due to family-unfriendly work policies which especially punish women. So what does this tell us? It tells us that there exist two available options when it comes to population management in most European nations. Either you bring in people who have a high fertility rate who almost always have larger families than, for instance, ethnic Swedes, or you through policy reform change a nation's government programs in order to encourage and make it easier and more attractive to raise families for the native population. So before being able to accurately answer what the solution to this problem is, we first need to ask ourselves why Europeans are more reluctant to have kids. Well, if we look at our population's adversaries regarding reproduction, meaning non-white foreigners from outside of Europe, they all have two things in common. Number one, lower levels of human capital, and number two, a completely different view on reproduction and children. In very poor countries, children have two primary functions: security at an old age and workers. They are low cost and can pretty early on perform very basic work-related tasks, and due to high infant mortality, nearly non-existent available contraception, and a lack of education primarily among women, kids just seem to keep popping out of the ground in these nations. Now, what does this have to do with Europe? Well, since any intelligent person understands that deeply rooted cultural norms don't just disappear as soon as you set your feet on European soil, people arriving here from these foreign countries just carry on as usual. They get ridiculous amounts of offspring and they soar over the European average of 2.1 child per family. They produce children like they need them to survive, despite available welfare programs and government-funded retirement plans. And they give birth to children like they need them as laborers, despite there being no available jobs for them in Europe due to their lack of higher education, lack of language skills, and of human capital in general. And this is understandable because they grow up in poor neighborhoods and they go to shitty public schools. So all of this results in problems. But paid political pundits are still writing articles and studies fervently praising the idea of a full-scale ethnic replacement of Europe's white native populations, since we're all just allegedly dying off, instead of spending even a minute into researching why that is.
But Swamtroll, why are you saying that all foreigners are poorly educated?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that people who produce insane amounts of children while living in ghettos full of other people who also have a non-existent social network in their host nation and who never learn the language and never have a shot at getting out of the comparative poverty that they're living in don't have a snowman's chance in hell versus the ethnic population who have smaller families, which allows them to invest more seriously into their future through placing their kids in good schools and living in good areas. That's all I'm saying. I'm well aware that not all immigrants are poorly educated, so that's not my point. The point I'm trying to make is that the argument about population growth in itself being a beneficial necessity and crucial for the betterment of European quality of life is bullshit. There exists no correlation between the number of people in a country when it comes to the production of actual wealth. One child growing up to become an engineer easily benefits a nation far more than 5 children who just grow up to sell their physical labor at dead-end jobs. Jobs which, by the way, are becoming fewer and fewer each year due to automation and outsourcing. This was shown very clearly in Sweden when our Prime Minister said in 2015 that we need more, I quote, easy jobs for arriving migrants, only to later realize that we don't have any easy jobs. Easy jobs in practice means a waste for the business owner. Hiring someone to just put on a lid onto a jar of jam is a waste comparing to just automating the process. You could find work in companies that produce lesser volumes of goods who are less likely to be automating their production, sure, but you will also find less job openings as well. And the argument about how European nations need mass migration in order to compensate for all of the old people who would otherwise not be able to retire comfortably is even dumber, and it shows of a lack of understanding about how economics works, which is honestly quite scary since these people are in positions of authority and should actually know this stuff. Mass importing people, who possess low human capital and face immense challenges with ever acquiring more, will only reduce the quality of living, especially for old people, since there will then be more people grabbing money from the collective tax pot. And their high fertility rate only makes things worse, not better. They give birth to large amounts of children who they very often can't provide for themselves, meaning that the responsibility once again falls upon the government/you, the taxpayer. So the population does indeed increase, but it does it through the importing of people whose net contribution to the nation's economy is negative. Our dysfunctional retirement system in Sweden needs an overhaul, not more migrants. That doesn't even make sense. Europe doesn't need a fertile, uneducated new group of people. We need more countries who reward their native population for getting larger families, and this could be done through the increase in funds you'd free up through stopping migration. One of the, in my view, biggest reasons to why Europeans get less kids is, in part, the postmodern demonization of the concept of the family. We've been fed this narrative about how motherhood is the capitulation of the previously free and independent woman into a life of reproductive servitude at the foot of the oppressive patriarch. People actually believe this shit. We need a completely new attitude regarding the family, and new pro-family government policies like those in Salvini's Italy in order to turn this around. Otherwise, we will soon be the racial minority in our native homelands. So to conclude, if you ever hear someone saying, we need migrants to fix Europe's dying populations and take care of our old people, you should know that it is complete and utter bullshit. An increase in human capital in a nation increases wealth, not simply an increase in population. If there is anything you should remember from this video, remember that. I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe, and share this video to people. Share it to your socialist teacher at your school or your NPC relative who watches too much mainstream news. They may not listen, but you can at least try. Until next time, take care and thank you very much for listening.
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in.